If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Tonight's guest is Joe. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Well, it's great having you, not for the reasons that we're going to talk about, but it's still great to have you, so thank you for your time.
I appreciate your time and how you've helped.
Oh, you're welcome. Joe, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I am a 65-year-old retired registered nurse. I was a nurse for 40 years. I absolutely think I was born to be a nurse. As a little child growing up, I always had a little injured animal of some type that I was nursing back to health. It just was second nature to me. And I loved being a nurse, not only for the challenge of it, but you were meeting people who were at their worst point in life, whether it was an accident not expected or a major surgery coming or a death in the family, and you could be there and be their strength and somebody that they could lean on. And it was an honor for me to be able to be there for people like that. I really enjoyed my calling. It was sad when I had to give it up.
Oh, I'm sure it was sad. Yeah, if you ask me, I think you're right. I think you were born to do that sort of thing. You're so loving and caring and such a good person. I'm not surprised to hear you say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Joe, from what I understand, you think your mom might have had a dogman encounter of her own. Why do you think that?
Well, we were talking one time about scary movies, and I think I was around maybe 12 or 13. And she said, well, we didn't have those when I was a kid growing up, but I had something happen to me one time that I think would made anybody scared. And I said, what was that? And my mother was a tomboy. She grew up in the hills of Arkansas. She was a true hillbilly. There was like 13 in the family, and she could outrun most of her brothers, and she loved basketball. I mean, she was a sports girl, and they had an outhouse that they had to use, and it was set back away, from their house. And so she went out one night about 1 o'clock in the morning, had her little kerosene lantern, and she went out there, and they had a spade that they kept in it, not only to kind of help hold the door closed, but sometimes snakes would be in there. And so it was nothing to her just to take that and just hit it and cut its head off. I mean, she was all tomboy. And she went out there one night. It was a full moon, so she was seeing pretty good. She took the lantern that had hardly any kerosene in it because she could see the trail. And she got out there and was doing her business, and something jumped and landed on the top of this outhouse. And it startled her because she couldn't imagine what could get up there so easy. And it was walking around on top of it, and, she could tell it was big and heavy, and it was sounding like it was on 2 feet. And she was thinking, now, that can't be. I mean, we're up here. It could be a mountain lion, but I would think I would be hearing 4. And it walked back and forth on the top of that, and she could hear it kind of like huffing a little bit, and it jumped down, and she could hear it coming around the outhouse on the outside, and she was getting kind of spooked because most of the time animals don't act like that up there. And it got over by the door, and it kind of scratched on a little bit. She was holding that door shut. And so she was pretty concerned, and she thought, well, I'm not going to leave until this thing gets tired and starts leaving itself. And it kind of got quiet. She thought, well, maybe this is the time. And then it landed back up on top of it again. So she thought this thing was trying to outweight me. So she thought, I can play that game. I'll just stay in here till morning if I have to. So she was sitting there pretty quiet, and it's kind of getting quiet. And then her lantern ran out of the kerosene. So now she's in the dark, and she's got this spade, and she's thinking, this is going to be my weapon. So she hadn't heard anything for a while, and so she opened up the door slowly. It had a bolt that you would just slide down. So she lifted that up, and she pushed the door out and grabbed the spade. And as she does, she hears a sound, and it's been up on top this whole time. And it leans down to kind of get a look at her, and it shocked her because it looked like a wolf, not a mountain lion. And she took that, and she said she hit it as hard as she could, like a slugger hitting a baseball for a home run with that spade right in the nose. And it let out a roar and kind of went backwards, and she started running like a deer. And she got to the house and she could hear it coming. And as she turned around to look, this thing went from being on 4 feet to up on 2 feet and had its arms out like it was going to grab her. So she jumped in, slammed the door, and she went running up the steps to her room. Now, she had 5 sisters, and they all had their own little bed, and they had 2 little drawers under each bed, one for their shoes and socks, and the other one for their clothes. So she jumped into her bed. Nobody was awake, and pulled her covers up over it. And she's shaking. She doesn't know what in the world she just saw. And then she hears the door open downstairs, and she realizes that in her fear and hurry, she didn't stop to drop the bolt down to lock that door. Now this thing is in the house, and she can hear it coming up the stairs, and she's thinking, it's following my scent. And she's really scared, and she's got the covers up real tight. She thinks she can hear it on all fours, and then it gets to her room. And now she only feels like there's only 2 steps, so she's thinking it's doing that thing again. And it literally crawls up from the foot of her bed onto her bed and comes up until it's actually got its nose against her face. And it's breathing in, and it's almost like the message being given, I could kill you right now. I could have killed you out there. You know, don't ever hit me again. She just like feels that's the thought being given to her. And it stayed on her for a while, and then it slowly backed off, and she heard it go down and go, and then she heard the front door open and close. And she was so terrified that she didn't tell anybody what happened, especially when her dad woke up the next day and realized that whoever was out there didn't close it, and the dogs had got in and ate a lot of their food. So she definitely wasn't going to own up to it then. But, you know, she always said, sometimes I wonder if I was just dreaming. And she said, but, you know, that was so scary, and I don't understand it. Never saw anything like that again, but I certainly didn't try to go to the bathroom at night anymore either. And so after I started learning about Dogman, I thought, you know, that's what that was. It sounds like it. Going from 4 feet to 2 feet? Had to be. I wish she was still alive so I could tell her. That was a Dogman, Mom. It wasn't a dream. It was a Dogman.
It sure was. Holy cow, what she must have gone through. That is horrible. That is awful. You had your first Dogman encounter one night when you were 17, Joe, and it frightened you so much you jumped into bed with your parents. Had you heard about cryptids before you had that experience? And if you had, what were your thoughts on them?
I had not. We didn't even have a TV when I was young. I mean, it was all work. We worked for everything we had. We had a little farm, and it was not doing well, and we were trying so hard. I had 2 older brothers, and they were 11 and 13 when I was born, and they weren't expecting any more kids. They were kind of disappointed, actually, that they had another child because it was going to be more expense. And then when my dad realized that I was a girl, he was very upset. He said he wished it had been a boy because, you know, they could work harder and help more. And here he is, you know, he's got a daughter. What's he going to do with a daughter? So it always made me feel, you know, kind of bad about that. So I quit going by Joyce when I was 10, and I started going by Joe because it didn't sound so girly. And I tried my best to keep up with my brothers on everything, every kind of chore. And one thing that my older brother always did, he tried to scare me. And if I kind of yelled out a little bit or something, he would tease me and say, you sound like a girl. So it was kind of an ongoing thing with him that you can't show fear and you definitely don't scream out. So ironically, when I went and jumped in the middle of my mom and dad in bed afraid, that was a big deal because I had never tried to show fear before. So that lets you know how much it rocked my world. I broke my own rule of showing no fear.
Well, you did, but it's totally understandable when you consider what happened to you. That first encounter, that was awfully intense. Not as intense as the later ones, but it definitely would get your motor running. How long did it take after you had that first encounter, though, Joe, before you found out that they're actually called dogmen?
Oh, it was decades. I only found out, I'm going to say 4 years ago. I had no idea what to call it. I always thought it was maybe some kind of a werewolf, but then werewolves are supposed to be in the movies only, or a demon from hell. I wasn't sure what it was. And then I actually stumbled onto some information about a dog man. I had a friend that was listening to some podcasts and got me started kind of listening, and I was going, hey, wait a second. This sounds kind of familiar. And then I got lucky and found yours. And that's when I really started learning, because you know so much about it. It's amazing. And now this thing had a name, and it made it more reasonable for me to know how to deal with it. Because before, how do you wrap your mind around something that you can't even describe what it is or how it exists or why it exists? You can't. And I think that's why it traumatized me as much as it did for as long as it did.
Well, that's totally understandable. Yeah, like you said, when you can hang a name on something that you're afraid of, that does help. It's not going to work wonders necessarily, but it does help, at least to a certain degree. So I can understand why you say that. All right, Joe, I know it's not going to be easy to talk about these experiences due to how traumatic they were, but in your own good time, when you're ready, give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Will do. Well, as I told you, I grew up trying to be as tough as I could and not show fear, just so that I had as much merit in my father's eyes as my two brothers. And I really convinced myself that I didn't get scared. And I decided at 17 that I wanted to become a nurse. And like I said, I had always taken care of little animals, and I just knew that's what I wanted to be. So I went and applied, and they said, well, normally we don't take women in at 17, but you seem to be a very mature 17, and you will be 18 before you graduate. So we're willing to give you a try on this. And I said, I will not let you down. And so I started my training. Well, it was harder on me than I thought, because you can't be a kid, when you're going in and seeing the things that you're doing and learning how to do these things, like on code teams and stuff. It's time to be all adult. And so I had a couple of friends that I still had left over from school. I had quit and got my GED so I could work on the farm, because we were getting close to going under. And I had a male friend that I was seeing on and off a little bit. And so we would get together and go out and eat and just ride around and laugh, and I could kind of be a kid. And then I would come in the evenings, probably about 10:30, 11 at night, go in, lay down, get some sleep, and I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start studying for a test I had that day. So it was fresh in my mind, and I would go in and take the test, and I was doing a 4.0 average, so I felt like that was working for me pretty good. Well, I came in one night, and the house that we had was way back in the middle of nothing, just woods and things all around you, very little acreage around it, and there was a little stream that came off the Neosho River, and it would flood easy. So this house was set up on cinder blocks before the foundation, because it had flooded into it before, and it was a very, very old house. So I would come in at night. Of course, you're out in the country. There's no street lights or anything to help you. It's pitch black. And my mother had a yellow bulb out on the front porch that's supposed to not let bugs come in. And that was the only thing I had to try to get into the house safely. Well, I was going up that one night, and there was something that made this unbelievable sound in the brush and the trees about 30 feet from the front door. And I stopped and I looked over and I thought, what in the world could be making a sound that big? And it sounded like it was only on 2 feet. And so I literally walked over to the edge of that porch, and I leaned out that direction, trying to see, with the use of that little yellow bulb, what was making that kind of sound. And it got quiet. Whatever it was quit moving. And then I realized, well, everything's quiet. There's nothing making any sound. And that was before I learned on programs like yours that means there's probably something out there that you don't want to be outside with. So I wasn't afraid at all. And in my little 17-year-old brain, I decided that this was a buck or something that had been trying to get through there and had kind of jumped up and maybe got his horns hooked into some branches of this tree, because it was quite a ways up on this tree that the branches were moving. And he was jerking and trying to get, unhooked, and he was up on his back feet. And that's how I could justify the sound of 2 feet and it being high in the tree. So I literally clapped my hands and yelled, "Get out of here," just as loud and as gruff as I could, trying to make it jump and maybe help it get loose. And, there was a little bit of a, oh, and I thought, wow, that didn't sound like anything like you would think a deer would do. But I also told myself, well, at night, animals seem bigger than better than they are because you can't see them. You only have sound. So it didn't scare me. I literally walked on in the house, went to bed, and forgot about it. 2 nights later, we were having a storm moving in, and I always loved to lay in bed and watch the storms. I watched the lightning. The house that we were in, it had real tall, narrow windows, and that's because it was built so far back that, where they had just kerosene lanterns to help them, that they had the windows tall, so no matter what time of day, you could catch the sun and help light that room up better. And I was in a bedroom that was the back wall of the house, and I had 2 windows with about a 2.5-foot space in between them of wall, and one lit up the area that was my bed, and the other one was strategically put to where it would light up the hallway, so you didn't have a dark hall you were going down in the early evenings. So I woke up and heard the thunder and some of the branches on the metal roof, and I was going to enjoy it. I didn't have school the next day, and I could enjoy, the lightning. And as I kind of turned around and get my pillows situated, and it lightened, and I noticed in the left window that there was something blocking it. And I couldn't understand, what could be blocking the lightning coming. And so I actually set up and kind of scooted over and put my feet over on the floor, and I'm looking at this window kind of startled, and it lightens again. And sure enough, only about the top 25% or 30% of that window was lighting up with the lightning. The rest of it was black. There was something blocking it. Now, remember, this house is up on cinder blocks. So what could be blocking it that tall? It would have to be 8, 9 foot off the ground. And I can't comprehend what could do that. So, of course, the first thing I thought was, it's my brother. He's out there. He's got something up, trying to make it look big in the window, and he's going to try to scare me. I think I'm going to go over and grab a hold of this curtain and jerk it back and tell him, I'm not scared. I know it's you. The curtains that I had, they were white panels, and they were thin, almost sheer, because I didn't have to worry about anybody looking in my windows. We were in the middle of nowhere. So I could see that it was something black, but I knew he couldn't see me because of the lightning. So I should be able to be the one to go up and jerk it back and scare him. Well, I get up and I start to kind of walk that way a little bit, and it lightens again. And I'm thinking, no, there's no way he could have something and be holding it and doing that well with it. And then in my little 17-year-old brain, I'm thinking, well, there's a shed back there. Maybe my dad has leaned something up against it. And when it's lightning, because it's not directly on top of the shed, it's blocking it, and it's just reflecting into my window, and maybe that's what it is. So I got up, and I went on down to the hallway, went to the bathroom, got a drink of water, and as I'm coming back into the room, it lightens again, and I literally stopped mid-stride because I'm in shock. This big black shadow is now over in the right window, the one that lines up with the hallway. And I'm wondering how in the world, that shadow from the shed could be looking like it's blocking that one now. And I kind of eased up a little bit, and I'm trying to understand this. So I decide I'm going to go over by my bed and go up and see if I can look around and see, what is causing this shadow. And as I go across to get even with the other window, it slides back over with me. Now I'm starting to get a little concerned about this because that was such a smooth glide. I know that's not my brother. He's not that coordinated. And I'm starting to get scared. The person who does not allow themselves to get scared is getting scared. So I stepped up a little bit closer because now I'm wanting to see what it is, what is going on. And I get about 1.5 feet from that window. And I'm thinking I can go ahead and reach out and pull it back and look. I'm inside. I'm safe, even though my body obviously is not believing what my brain is saying because my knees are starting to shake. And I'm thinking it's probably a good thing that I just went to the bathroom because the way my body is getting scared, I might not have held that too well. And it lightens again. Now this time, with one little glide, and because I'm only about 1 foot away now, it comes down, it like hunkers down, and it's even with me, height-wise. Now that's got me scared, because that tells me this thing can see me. Even though it's dark in here, it obviously is getting a really good look at me. It's keeping even with me, and now it's the same height as me. And I'm not moving. I don't think I can move. I feel like I'm just nailed to that spot. And I'm just focused as the lightning's coming in, trying to see what in the world am I dealing with? What is this? And I hear it against the window, just a little kind of a hit to it. And then I think I hear that it's taking a deep breath. And I'm thinking, my God, this thing is trying to get my scent. And now I'm wondering, is this what was out in the trees? Could this be what was making this sound? Is this what I yelled at, clapped my hands, and said real mean, get out of here? Did I make it mad? I'm not feeling like such a big, brave person anymore. And the lightning's coming in, the storm's getting closer. And as I'm standing there trying to see with this next flash of lightning, this thing is still cowered down, but it reaches up with its right arm, and it's reaching up to the top of the window. And I am in shock. There is not a paw. There is a hand, and it's a huge hand. It looks about like the size of a hand that you would think would be on like a silverback gorilla. It's huge. There's 5 digits, and each digit has this black claw that has to be 2.5 inches easy, with just a slight curve into it. It's not straight out like my nail would be. It's got a slight curve in. And I remember thinking, wow, if that got a hold of you with that curve, you're not getting out of that grip until it's ready for you to be out of that grip. And my knees really started shaking hard. And then I think I hear it like clawing into the wood of the window outside. And I'm getting really scared. I'm thinking this thing's trying to figure out how to get this window off. And then all it's got is just this glass. And what if it comes right on through it and gets me? And I'm wanting to run, but my body is not following my command to run. I'm just there. So I don't know what to do. I can't think. And now the lightning's right on us. And it comes down and it hits a tree, this dead tree in the backyard. And when it does, it takes down a branch. And there's fireballs dancing everywhere. And right after it did that, have you ever seen lightning that goes like doo, 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 doo? They're just so fast together that it's almost like daylight because it keeps it lit up. Well, as that was occurring, this thing turns to look up at the tree branch that's coming down. I guess it's wondering where it's going to land. And that's when I got my look at the side profile of this. And that's when my world changed as I knew it. Was never going to be the same again. This thing had a wide head. It looked like a wolf, but it was huge head on this thing. It had ears like a German Shepherd or like a Doberman had been cut on the top, points on it, probably 4 to 5 inches long, tufts of hair in the ends of the ears. This nose on this thing, this muzzle, was so much longer than anything I'd ever seen on a dog or pictures of wolves, and it was gigantic. And the teeth, oh my gosh, the teeth. They had to be 2 to half and maybe 3 inches long, and the canines were even longer than that. And they really showed up. I mean, they were a brilliant white. You knew you were looking at that. The fur looked like it was all black. I couldn't see any lighter areas. Of course, again, it was flashes of light. But, you know, I could tell with the side profile and the arm they'd been reaching up, it was big. It was strong. It was muscle bound. And I took off and I went running and I went and jumped onto the couch and I covered my head up as tight as I could and I was shaking. I couldn't believe what I had just saw. And I didn't know if I should tell anybody because, again, I didn't want them making fun of me. I didn't want them to know I was afraid. But I suddenly changed my plans. I told them it was getting towards the end of my first year, my LPN year, and I wasn't going to go out anymore at night. I was going to stay home and study. And the truth was, I wasn't going to be outside in the nighttime with that thing. I had no idea what I had seen. The next day, before I went to school, I went walking back there trying to convince myself that this hadn't happened. The old tree branch was down on the ground. As I looked up at that window, I could see deep gouges in that window, and it looked fresh. And as I looked down on the ground, I could see the black paint that was the color of that wood trim. There was crumbles of it down on the ground, and I thought, no, that wasn't a dream. This happened. So I got scared to be in my room. I felt like I had angered this thing. So what I would do is I would come in and I would lay down because it was daylight and take like a 3-hour nap. I would get my clothes for the next day, hang them on the doorknob of the room, and then I would go into the living room and be on the couch. And I would sleep there till my alarm went off at 3, and I would get up and study on the couch with the lamp. Well, unfortunately, the couch and the lamp was right across the hall from my mom and dad's room. And my dad told me, "You're interrupting my sleep. You're going to have to go back to your room." And I said, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "I don't know. I just need a break." And he said, "Well, you can't study there with it." And I said, "I know. I'll go to the kitchen." Now, to me, that seemed like a really safe option. But in reality, the back wall of the house that was my wall to my room, it formed like the letter L with the kitchen. So actually, moving from my window to the kitchen window only took about 6 feet on the outside. But because you had to go down a hallway and through the living room and then into the kitchen, it seemed like it was a lot further to me. This kitchen was shaped like a shoebox. You know, you went in on one short edge. The long sides, they had windows that ran all the way down. Again, so you had plenty of light. And the windows were at the top. Now, it was a typical kitchen window size, and my mom had solid white panels on the bottom pane. There was a gap, and then at the top she had a ruffle. And so you would have to be, again, 8.5, 9 foot to look into that house because it's set up on cinder blocks to see anybody. So We didn't even have blinds or shades or anything for that. It was open like that all the time, and it felt very safe. And then there was an outside door on the other short end. So I'm studying, and I would look at that white curtain, and I would picture it as a page and me writing down the answers to a question I was asking myself, and was really enjoying it. Had a little lamp on there I was studying with, because the kitchen had a big fluorescent light. There was 3 of them that went down the kitchen, and you didn't want to turn that on. It'd be way too bright at night. So the lamp worked just fine. And I was studying. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden, I had a brand new sensation I'd never had, and that was that the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And I had never had that sensation before. And I stopped, and I'm thinking, what is this? And then all of a sudden, somehow, and don't ask me how I knew, but I knew there was something at the window behind me. And I felt like it was looking at me, which, again, would seem impossible, but it was like I could feel it. And then all of a sudden, I heard this growl, and it was the most deep, canine-sounding, guttural growl that you could ever imagine. It was like, oh my God, how could anything sound that big and that deep? I mean, it was unbelievable. I couldn't move. I remember feeling like I was frozen to the spot. I couldn't even put the pencil down that was in my hand. I was beyond terrified. And this thing growled again, and it got louder, and I couldn't believe it could. And then all of a sudden, and the only way I knew how fast it traveled was because it continued to growl, but it felt like it just went around, cleared down that wall, across the back part that had the outside door, and clear up the next wall till it was at the window in front of me. And now I have the realization that it's looking me in the face. And I'm looking down. I'm afraid to look up. And it was like, and I don't understand still what happened or how it happened, but I had a thought come to my mind. And it said, if you look it in the eyes, it will come into you. I didn't know if it meant possess me or come in through the window and kill me because I made eye contact with it. You know, some animals, some canines, if you look it in the eye, it's a challenge, and they're coming. So I wasn't sure, but I was going to take that information to heart. I wasn't going to look it in the eyes. And then all of a sudden, it was like my head was following orders from somebody else. It started going up. And I'm going, no, 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 no. And it's still raising up. And I'm thinking, don't you dare look at this thing in the face. Don't you dare. And as I'm getting to just the edge of the top of that panel where I know the very next thing I'm going to see, and I'm trying to close my eyes, and they're just rolling back up. I mean, it's like open. It's like, what am I doing? I see this yellowish green kind of neon glow, 2 of them. And I'm thinking, well, now that's crazy because something can't be up that high with a little lamp and have eye shine off of that. And it was like suddenly my body broke loose and I could move. I jumped up so hard and so fast that the chair I was sitting in skidded across the kitchen floor and it slammed into the refrigerator behind me hard. And I think the sound of that slamming was just like telling me go. And I ran out of there through the living room and I went running into my mom and dad's bedroom and I landed in that bed right between them. I was terrified and I didn't care who knew it. And I about gave them a heart attack, you know. I mean, what is their daughter doing landing in there? my mom turned on the lamp and she's looking at me so startled and she said, "What is going on?" And all I can get out is outside, outside monster, outside monster. And she starts to tease me and she says, "Do you want me to go outside and make that big bad monster go away?" And I started crying hysterically, "No, no, no." And I've got a hold of her arm and she's realizing I'm being very serious with her. I'm not finding that funny. And she's kind of giving me a funny look. Well, my dad sets up and he turns on his lamp and he goes, "Joe, Joe, Joe." And I look over and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm shaking so hard. He said to my mom, "Is she having a seizure? She's moving this whole bed." And my mom goes, "No, that's not a seizure, but she's shaking, all right. I mean, she's moving everything." And he said, "You need to get a hold of yourself. You know, are you afraid?" And he knew that that would make me go, "I'm not afraid of anything," like I always responded. And that's what he was hoping for, kind of bring me back around. But instead, I shook my head yes. And I was shaking. And that just shocked him because I was admitting to it. And that's when he reached out and put his hand on my arm and he said, "You're okay. You're okay. You fell asleep while you were studying and you had a nightmare because you're under stress of the studies." And I so wanted him to be right. I so wanted that to be the case that I actually shook my head yes, and I believed him because that sounded better than me thinking this thing's back and it found me in the other room. So I accepted that. And I went out and I got on the couch and I covered my head up, but I couldn't go to sleep the rest of the night. Now, I started hesitating about going and studying, so I tried sitting on the floor in front of the couch with the lamp under a blanket so he couldn't see it and study. And he just said, "That's ridiculous. It was a nightmare. Go back in. You'll see." So I went back in and, nothing happened the first 2 nights. And I thought, well, he was right. And I kind of got back more relaxed and I'm studying again and I have a big test coming up. We're getting close to being done with that year. And all of a sudden, I feel the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And I remember going, "No, no, 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 no. Like, please don't be here." And I'm waiting for the growl at the back of my neck at that window. And it shocked me because it was in front of me. It started at that window this time. And I was like, oh no, I didn't even have time to get ready for this. And I was yelling, "Go away, please. I'm sorry that I yelled at you. Go away, go away, go away." And my head starts going up. And I'm thinking, no, 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 don't. As I got up to that, I see the whole head move. And now I realize how big, how wide this head is. It's taken up almost that entire glass of that one window pane. And it has me in shock. And as I'm thinking of that, my head's coming on up. And for a brief second, I started to get a look at it. And yep, this is what was out there. It looks like a werewolf, I guess. I don't know. And I took off running again and landed back on the couch covering up. Well, I thought, I'm going to flunk out because I can't get up and study anymore. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. And I called the guy that I had been seeing every once in a while, and I said, "Can I come to your house tonight and study? I have one more day of finals. I can't do it here, and I'll tell you why when I see you." And he goes, "Yeah, I've been wondering what's going on. Are you breaking up with me?" And I said, "No, I will explain when I see you." So we went out to eat, and I very nervously informed him that I was being stalked by a werewolf. And he started to laugh a little bit, but he saw how serious I was being. And when I saw him start to laugh, I felt so betrayed. I just knew he would be the person who believed me. And I started to tear up. And when he saw that tear go down my cheek, he felt really bad because, like I said before, I was a pretty tough person, and he actually liked that about me. I wasn't a girly girl that had to have the flowers or the candy, anything like that. And I could keep up with him on a lot of stuff. And so he wasn't used to seeing this. So he said, you know what? I'm sorry. Let's go get your stuff. Get your books, get your clothes. You can spend the night. I'll stay up with you, and I'll guard and protect you while you study. And my dog King, there's nothing going to come into that yard. King will run it off. And I had to laugh because that's true. He had a pit bull, and it was huge. And I had been seeing him for 6 to 8 months, and he still had to slowly introduce me to that dog every time. And then once I was in the house and everything was fine, he was okay with me. But I thought, I just can't believe this. But he was so protective of his master, you had to pass his inspection every single time. So we get in, and we're studying in the living room floor. I have my books spread out around me, and he's leaning up against the couch, and he's playing one of his video games with the sound off. And he said, I'm getting kind of thirsty. Are you? And I said, yeah, I could use some orange juice. And he goes, okay, I'll go get us some. And I could see into his kitchen from the living room. And I was thinking it was taking him quite a while. And he's just leaned over, looking in there. And I'm starting to almost laugh because I'm thinking it's taking him forever to decide what he wants to drink. Silly guy. And I'm feeling really good because it's like 3:40 in the morning and nothing's happening. And I hear him go, come here now. And he said it so strange. And it was higher. And so I start walking in there, and I said, are you being traumatized because you can't decide between something and juice? And I'm laughing. And as I lean down to look in to see what he's looking at, I realize all the liquids in the refrigerator are shaking back and forth. And I realize they're shaking because he is. And then I hear his dog. And his dog, that's on a big heavy chain, was whimpering like a little scared puppy. And I said to him, is that your dog? He said, it can't be. My dog wouldn't make a sound like that. It's got to be some dog that he's gotten in the yard, and he's showing it who's boss. And I said, well, I hope it doesn't kill it. And he said, no, I think if it runs off, he'll be okay. But that's not King. And about that time, lo and behold, the hair goes up on the back of my neck. And I'm thinking, no, 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 how could this be? Because I'm 5 miles away from the house out in the country. He lives in town, on the other side of town, as a matter of fact. How could it trail me and find me through all of those different scents? This is impossible. It can't be. But sure enough, there came the growl. And I saw him just tense up. He couldn't believe it. And he looks over at me. His eyes are wide. His mouth is wide open. And I looked at him and I said, oh my God. It followed me. It followed me. Oh my God, it's hunting me. And I think it was the way I said hunting me, because I'm realizing it the same time he is. He reached over and grabbed me by my wrist. Now back then, I weighed 110 pounds soaking wet. And he was 6'2" and probably weighed 210 pounds. So when he grabbed me and took off, I was going where he was going, like it or not. And he started to drag me out of the kitchen. And the way he was doing it put us right in front of that kitchen window. And as his eyes met the eyes of this monster, he came to a dead stop. And I almost ran into him. And I'm looking at him, and I'm in shock, and I realize that his eyes are glowing a yellowish green. And as I'm looking back, I realize So it's this monster, and I'm thinking, wow, this monster is eye locked with him, and he's not moving. And as I'm looking at this thing, I'm getting a better look at it. I'm realizing just how big those eyes are. They're like silver dollars, and they're a long ways apart. This head is huge. They've got to be at least 6 or 7 inches apart, probably more. And the hair around the neck almost looked like a lion's mane, the way it was sticking out and so thick and just jet black is all I could see. Now, the hair on the face wasn't as long, and you could see the black skin underneath it. The muzzle was long, it was big. The holes of the nose, they were far apart, they were big. And it had its mouth open as it was growling, and those teeth, wow, they were huge, and they were so white. And the one thing that I have had a lot of nightmares about was because of what it did next. It was drooling. And I don't know if it was drooling because its mouth was open and it was growling, or it was drooling because it was thinking how good we were going to taste when it ripped us apart. But it took this long black tongue. It reminds me of a tongue of a giraffe. You know, they're like, or a chow. They're dark, like between a black and a purple. And it took this tongue and it licked up the drool and put it back into its mouth. And just that movement, it gave me the chill. It's making me have the chills right now, just seeing it in my mind's eye. Oh, golly. And it was looking at him, and it happened to look down, and it saw where he had a hold of my arm, and it kind of made this snarl. You know how a dog will kind of wrinkle its top lip up when it's going to snarl at you, and kind of does this chewing motion, like, and it making a sound. That's what this thing started doing. And it was like, I knew it was letting him know, I'm going to kill you. And he read that somehow. It's like we both knew that thought at the same time. Like it somehow delivered that thought to us. And he took off with me, and he's dragging me through the living room. There was a sitting room, his bedroom, and then the bathroom. The bathroom, there were no windows in it. That was smart. Very smart on his part. Unfortunately, the bathroom was at the back wall of the house, just like the kitchen, and kind of like with my house, to be able to go from the kitchen window where he was looking in to where we would be standing in the bathroom was maybe 8 feet on the outside wall. Though it'd taken us quite a while to get around to it in the house, it wasn't doing that. It just moved over. We're sitting there, and he's looking at me, and he is shaking so hard. He's got me so tight against him that I almost can't breathe. And I tell him, let go a little bit, let go a little bit. I can't take a deep breath. And he looks at me, and he says, I'm so sorry. He said, I promised you that I would keep you safe because I didn't think it was real. I thought you were just seeing things because you were so tired. But this thing is real. And I said, it is. And I think it's hunting me. How could it find me? And he goes, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And he's just standing there looking at me. He's kind of shaking his head. And he's shaking, and so am I. And then I feel those hairs go up again on the back of my neck. And I'm thinking, this can't be happening again. It's almost like my body had got used to sensing when this thing was approaching. And what a thing to have your body get used to. But all of a sudden, it made this roar. And I mean, it was deep. I thought I'd heard it deep before. Oh, no. This was 10 times louder and deeper and more vicious. Oh, my God. And when it did it, right there, it's like it lined up with us, like somehow it knew where we were. And you could feel it in your chest. It felt like it was messing my heartbeat up. My heart didn't know what to do. And I couldn't believe that. And he could even feel it in his chest because he reached down and grabbed at his chest for a second. And I knew he was feeling it too. And it started growling more and more and getting more angry. And I remember looking up, and we were standing by the bathroom sink, and there was a bathtub that had a shower into it too. And there was shelving on the wall that you could reach up while you're standing in front of the sink and get his cologne or his deodorant. And these things on these glass shelves that were attached to the wall, they were shaking just like our chest was, but they were moving forward with the vibration, and they were literally moving forward and falling off the shelf and falling into the bathtub. Just from the sound, not being hit and knocked in there, vibrating from the sound. How can anything do that? But it was happening. And I remember watching his cologne bottle fall and break, and that bathroom filling up so thick of his cologne that it was almost hard to breathe. And he starts yelling, go away, get out of here. And King is crying. Oh, he is so scared. And he went, oh no, King, King, King. And he's like shouting his dog's name, like, oh, he's out there with it. And I think King misunderstood. I think King meant Daddy's wanting me to attack it because he's in trouble. And God bless that dog. That dog came running with a growl. And we heard this thing turn and roar back. And King jumped. And we heard this thing kind of, whoo, it got hurt. King had bit it. And the fight was on. And all of a sudden, King went from growling and trying to be in charge to screaming out in pain. Oh, it was awful to hear how this dog was howling and being in so much pain. And he's looking at me, and he's starting to fill up with his eyes with tears. And he says, oh my God, it's killing my best friend. It's killing my buddy. And I felt so bad, Vic, because if I hadn't have told him, if I hadn't have come over that night, that thing would not have followed me, and it would not have attacked his dog, and it wouldn't have killed his dog. I wouldn't have cost him his best friend. I wouldn't have cost him his dog. And it was sounding so awful, and he started praying. And I'm trying to pray with him too. But I don't know how to pray. I don't know to pray that it's over with quick, or somehow, King does the impossible and he kills it. I don't know what to pray.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. I'll tell you what, Joe, let's take a break. We'll be right back. All right, Joe, whenever you're ready, please continue.
Okay. It's unbelievable sitting there listening to this dog, and you want to have it over for the dog, but that means death, and you feel guilty trying to wish death upon this dog that jumped at trying to protect you. And he's just looking at me still going, it's killing my best friend. And I'm feeling that wave of guilt again about how could I have done this to somebody that I care about so much? How could I have done this to him? And so we start praying, and God answered our prayer in that his neighbor heard all of this going on and the screams. He thought it was me screaming, not the dog. And he called the police department and said, get somebody here to this address. Somebody's being murdered. Get here now. And we start hearing police sirens coming from 3 different directions. And I don't think they're stopping where we are, but I'm hoping that it scares it off. Because what had happened after it went silent with King, it started tearing into the back of the house. It was coming for us. You could literally hear wood breaking, and you knew. And we were so terrified that we couldn't even run. We couldn't even move to get going and out of that room. We were just frozen, like we were an easy target. And it's coming on. And, it's getting louder and louder, and you can hear boards breaking, and you're thinking, oh my God, if we try to go out, is it going to come around the side and kill us? We can't make a run for it. This is the only room that doesn't have windows. We have to stay here. And it's getting louder, and it's roaring. It's like it knows it's getting ready to get us. And so he goes, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. And then again, that's when we heard the sirens coming. And they come sliding up, and it suddenly gets quiet. So, he goes, I think it's gone. And I said, well, I'm afraid to try to see. And he goes, well, I am too. And so he goes and says, we're going to stay right here. And then we hear bang, 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 bang on the door. And it's the police. And they're saying, open this door or we're going to kick it in. We have a report that somebody is screaming, and we have got to get in to make sure that everybody is okay. And so he goes, we're going to have to do that. He's going to kick the door in. And I said, can we wait just a minute? Because I think that thing's going to jump him. And he goes, we can't, we've got to go. And so he goes in there and he opens up the door and he says, come in quick, get in here quick. And they're kind of looking at him funny. And so they want to know what's going on. And as we're both trying to tell them, they're looking at us like we've lost our mind. And one of them even said, did you party a little too hard tonight with something? And he goes, no, look at her books. She's a nursing student. She's not trying to sit here and party. She's trying to pass her courses. And this is what's been happening. And so we're telling you the truth. And about that time, one of the officers that had gone into the backyard came around and he said, guys, you need to see this. And so we started walking out and we're with them. And we go around to the back of the house. And I watched him fall to his knees, just like something dropped him. And I'm looking at him kind of confused, and I follow his eyes, and then I realize what he's seeing. He is seeing what's left of King. King had his right front leg ripped off. He had his back left leg ripped off. He had a hole in the torso, and his head was off, and it was several feet back in the yard, like it had torn it off and thrown it. And the house was white, and it was it looked like it was spray painted with red blood, and that he had maybe picked this dog up with a chain and had spun it around or something, trying to make that effect of that, like it was wanting to do whatever it could to torture him. They're looking at each other, and he goes, how do you even write this report? He goes, I don't know. I don't know how you write this report. He goes, I don't either. We go over and we get looking at this hole, this thing, and it started tearing into the walls. And it was like 3 foot by 3 foot. And as we're looking, even the boards that you put into, construction, then you put that sheetrock on it to make the walls, even some of that was splintered. And we got realizing the only thing left for it to actually have been in there was the next thing it was going to do was tear through the sheetrock. We had got that close. And that will just make your heart skip a beat. You're realizing you were minutes away from being torn just like King was. I couldn't believe it. So we wanted to go in and get our stuff, and I was begging them to stay with us, don't leave us here. And they could tell we were really that scared. And he said, do you own this place? And he said, well, buying it on contract. And he said, well, do you want to report this? And he said, I don't even know how to report it. He goes, yeah, I don't know how to ask you to report it either. He said, I'm willing to let this go if you are. And he goes, yeah, I'm good with that. And he goes, good, so am I. Because nobody would believe us back at the station. And so they just kind of going to let it go at that.
So he came and I got my clothes and went, and I had my rest of my finals that day. He drove me to school. That was like 18 miles from there. And he waited on me out in the parking lot. As I went in and took my finals, if you can believe that. I don't even remember the test, but somehow, thank God, I passed them. And, I came out and he was sitting there just kind of quiet. And he said, I really didn't believe you. And I'm sorry. And I said, no, I'm the one that's sorry. I cost you your dog. I cost you King, and I'm so sorry. And he said, no, I cost King because I told you you could come over. And he said, but I think this is going to mess with my head. I think when I see you, I'm going to see King, and I don't know that we could see each other anymore. And you can't really argue that. I felt so guilty, and I understood exactly what he was saying. And I said, okay, I get it. I understand it. So I knew that I was going to lose my best friend that night too, just like he lost his. I was going to lose mine. So it was about 3 or 4 weeks before I heard from him again. And, he did want us to kind of see each other. But he said he'd been thinking about it. And we talked it through. He said, we can't stay around here. That thing's going to be coming for us. He said, because I think it's going to be hunting me now as much as it is you. And we can't tell people about this. I don't know. Maybe that brings it after us. So we made a vow to never tell anybody about it. It had to be a vow of silence. And we did a pinky swear on that. And we started dating a little bit. We ended up getting married, had a daughter, and he just couldn't get over it. So we split up before she was even a year old. And, we never talked about that. I hardly ever saw him. She never saw us in a room together. Said she wouldn't even know what it was like to have her parents in a room together. And she was visiting him when she was 12. And, for that, a couple of weeks in the summer. And I had to be very careful when she went to see him because he had gotten heavy into drugs and alcohol. And I was surprised because he hadn't been like that at all before. So she was home and he gone out with some of his friends to party. And as he came in, she was watching the movie Silver Bullet. And there was a scene where this werewolf was underneath the floorboards of a greenhouse. And it came through the boards as it was roaring, just as he came through the back door. And she said he lost it. It's like he got so mad at her and he was screaming at her that I had to explain to her later, no, you caused a flashback because he heard the wood breaking and the roar, just like it was at the back of the house. And he told her, get that off. Don't you ever turn anything like that on again. Don't you ever watch anything. And she said, Dad, it's a movie. He said, no, it's not. Werewolves are real. Ask your mom. So she couldn't wait to get home. And I mean, when she came home, she didn't even have her coat off yet. And she said, Dad says to ask you if werewolves are real. And I'm looking at her stunned. And I said, he broke the vow of silence. And she said, what? So I had to sit down and explain to my daughter what had happened. And she was in shock that we had kept that quiet from her all that time. I didn't talk to him about it. He had said that to her. And you fast forward about another 30 years. And he was on his deathbed. He was dying of cirrhosis of the liver from all of his alcoholism and things. And I asked if I could speak with him. And so she gave me the number to where he was. And we talked about it. And he said, I told you wrong. And I said, what? He said, we should have talked to people about it. He said, because I held that in. And the only way I could go to sleep at night was to drink or get so messed up on pills that I could go to sleep past the eyes, because when I would close my eyes, I would see those green eyes just drilling into my soul. And then I realized that's why he had become a drug addict and alcoholic. He was trying to pass out where he didn't see that. And Vic, that made me feel guilty all over again. not only did I cause him to lose his best friend, but I wrecked his life by having him invite me over that night. I couldn't believe that I actually had ruined his whole life. And he told me, he said, start talking to people about it. Don't let it eat you up alive. And he asked me if I ever had problems, and I said, I have nightmares all the time. And he said, see what I mean? You're going to have to tell people. And I told him I would, and because of him having me make that promise, that's why I'm talking to you tonight. I'm keeping my word. And it has helped. And you've been a big help. And I thank you again, Dick. And I thank Ann again for helping me, because I don't want to end up the way he has. I mean, it's affected me. I never had a dog for a pet, and I would have loved to have had it. But I just felt guilty, he lost King. How could I have a pet? And he told me to go get one. I haven't done that yet. But maybe that'll be the next sign of healing, is I'll call you someday and introduce you over the phone to my dog. We'll see. But that is my Dogman encounter.
It's not your fault that King died. It's not your fault that your boyfriend had those encounters. At least back then he was your boyfriend. It's not your fault that he had that encounter. Like you said, you had every reason to think by going all the way across town, through town, that there was no way that Dogman was going to be able to track you. You had no reason to think for a second that it would be able to do that. You having that encounter with him, that's not your fault. It's just something that was extremely unfortunate that it happened, but it's not your fault that it did. So please never lose sight of that fact. If you look at it that way, as if it was your fault, then yeah, that is going to cause you a lot of pain that you shouldn't be suffering from. I mean, you have experiences like that, it's hard enough to come to terms with them as it is. But if you put a load on your plate that doesn't need to be there on top of everything else that you're dealing with, you're just going to make it harder on yourself. So, like I said, please don't do that.
Yeah. I think that you're right. I think it did cost me almost my life. I was in a very high-pressure job as a director of nursing of a 140-bed facility. And I guess with the stress of the job, the Dogman nightmares were coming hard and fast every night. I wasn't hardly getting any sleep. And I ended up having what they call a widowmaker heart attack. And only 3% of people live when that happens. And the damage done to your heart, you never walk away from it and say, oh, I survived it without any big problems, because that's just not the case. And what happened with me is that it damaged my sinoatrial node, or known as the pacemaker of the heart. So I could be sitting watching TV with a heart rate of 78 beats a minute, and it will fire in two places all at once. And the bottom part of my heart, that responds to that to make the heart beat, starts responding to both of them. And I'll go from 78 beats a minute to 198 beats a minute. And it feels like somebody put a stick of dynamite in your chest and blew it up. It is so painful. And your blood pressure drops to 60 over 30. You're going to pass out if you go to stand up. So I have to call 911. They come get me. They give me a medicine called the Denison, and it stops your heart on a dime. And when it does that, it feels like a professional boxer punching you in the chest. They wait 3 minutes, and then they restart your heart. I've had to go through that 33 times. And each time it damages my heart a little bit more. So all 4 valves of my heart now are leaking. And I've had to go on disability and give up my nursing job that I loved. And I found a place to live, and a little town. And that's where I've been living the past 7 years. And now I have more problems because of that, living there. And so it's been really, really hard road for me. So just finding out what this was called, having you tell me that I don't have to carry that load of guilt, that's going to really help offset what I'm going through now. because I'm going through a lot physically now. The house that I'm in now, when I was first moving in and I was walking and packing things, I heard this guy that was coming out to do a rotor-rooter on the pipes because nobody had lived in it for 7 years. I heard him break the sewer pipe right under my feet in the bathroom. And I went running out to say, hey, you just broke something. And I heard him break it again out in the yard. And he was trying to take that out as fast as he could. And he said, I've got to go get a part. And he started leaving, throwing things in his truck. And I said, are you going to put the cap back on, to that pipe sticking out? He said, I'll take care of that when I get back. He never came back. And so my landlord, he and his wife lived across the street. And I let him know he broke this. And he hasn't come back. And he said, well, I'll see if I can get a hold of him. Well, he didn't answer any of his calls. So he came over and he put the cap back on. And the stool was flushing better. I mean, there wasn't the resistance like before. He said, well, maybe that was just what it sounds like when the branches get clear and you just don't know that. So I bought that. Okay, I don't know that. That was in December. In April and May and June, start getting all these showers and rains because of the season change. I started smelling like a sewer smell after a rain. And I told them, it's coming up through the bathroom sink. I can smell it a little bit in the bedroom. But 3 or 4 days after the rain, I couldn't smell it anymore. Well, it has increasingly got worse. And my health started going downhill. And now 7 years later, I have to walk with a roller walker with a seat on it because I can only walk about 14 feet and I have to sit down on the seat and try to get my air back. And I have so much pain and swelling in my joints that I have to slide my feet like somebody, skiing, trying to get along to go up to some hill or something to go down. I can't even hardly bend my knees. I have to sleep in a recliner. I can't lay flat in a bed because I can't breathe. And I'm just really surprised. So my daughter, who's 44, moved in with me in January to help take care of me, and her health started declining rapidly. And this year, with all the rain and everything coming, it was so strong and staying that way that she had the windows up in the bedroom that I used to sleep in, even when we had the air conditioner running. And her husband had passed away 5 years ago, and she just really wasn't fixing anything. She was just leaving it. And I said, this is really bad. Something's going on. And my daughter has developed a serious cough. She's not getting over it. And I think that, we've got some serious issues here. So she hired this guy to come in and to fix the broken pipe out in the yard. So he told me he's going to shut the water off for a day. And he came and said, you were right. It was broke out there. And he said, but everything should be fine. I said, well, if that's how a break sounds, then we're not fine. And I told him what I had heard and that I had been telling them that, going on 7 years. So he goes underneath the house and he sees that he had broke it right underneath the stool. So there was 2.5 to 3 feet deep of raw sewage. And black mold had been growing all over this stick. And it was like 5 inches long. It was so thick. And we have been breathing that. And that's what's been taking my health down and what's making her sick. And so he went over and told her, now that he had seen that, he had to fix it. He couldn't leave it that way. And he told me that I would have to find a place to stay. That would probably take like 5 days to get all of that dug out and get that pipe, dry there and cleaned out and replace it and get the black mold out. And that would probably be another 5 days. So it would be like 10 days we had to find some place to go. He comes back the very next day in the evening and says, well, we're all done. You can move back in. And I said, what? And he goes, yeah, we got it. I said, how can that be? He said, oh, we did. We went over, talked to her. He said, you were right about everything. He said, I'm so sorry. And I thought, why is he saying he's sorry? And I said, well, you don't have to say you're sorry because you did it in record time. And he goes, yeah, that's what I did. And he leaves. And my daughter said, that was kind of strange, wasn't it? I said, it was. And so my landlord came over and she was so mad at me. And she said, why did you tell him about that? And I said, because we're getting sick. And I have looked up black mold poisoning. And guess what? It makes you where it's hard for you to breathe. It makes your muscles and your joints get very painful and swollen, and walking becomes difficult. And you start forgetting things. You start having like early signs of dementia, trying to come up with words. You can't think of what it was. And said even my daughter's starting to do that part. And she's got this cough going. We're sick, and it had to be fixed. And I've been telling you every year. And she said, well, because you told him that and you cost me a lot of money, I want you guys out by the end of July. And I said, and if I hadn't said anything, she said, you could have lived here till you died. And I said, but the way it's going, I don't think it'd been much longer. And she said, well, I'm sorry, but you need to get out. And so now we're trying to find some place to go. And it has to be with a ramp so I can try to get into the house. And we're having a lot of problems trying to find a place. And I don't know what we're really going to do, but I appreciate you helping us with this. And, I can get sleep and not worry about it so much now, so that I feel more like trying to handle that stress. Because the stress of that and lack of sleep would throw me back into, what they call an SVT, a supraventricular tachycardic episode. And I don't have any guarantees when they stop my heart that it'll start back up. So I could leave that way, leave my daughter. So again, thank you for helping me start to get a little bit of peace of mind and sleep so that we can look for a home.
Oh, you're welcome. From talking with you, it sounds like you just might have found a home where you can move into, and it would definitely be a much better situation for you. What more can you tell us about that?
I did find a home in Fredonia, and it's about 8 miles away from where I live. It's a house that I can step into. The steps are small. It has a handrail that I could use to get in. It has plenty of room for us. It's central heat and air. It's in a safe neighborhood. And they're going to put a stove and a refrigerator and a washer and dryer into us, because I won't have any of that anyplace else that I go. It's going to be very expensive moving in, though, because it's going to be about $300 more a month than what I was paying on my disability check, which is going to make it rough. But my daughter is also on disability with her heart and her lungs and some mental issues that she has gone through, because I had her at the end of my 6th month. They life-flighted me out having her, and it just caused some problems. Her body wasn't in the oven baking long enough, I guess is how we could put it. So she will be able to help me a little bit pay on that so we can have a nice place to live. And it'll be nice being where we live right now. If I need a loaf of bread, I have to drive 8 miles into Fredonia and then 8 miles back, 15 miles. But here, where this is, it's a half a block to the store. That'll just be so much easier and better for us. And the people that have it, I think, are going to be very sweet and very kind. And they're not going to knowingly let us live in something that is causing us health issues. And I definitely don't think they'd make you get out because you're telling someone, hey, this is what's going on and I need help. So I'm really thrilled. I just now have to come up with the ability to, get the first and last month's rent and the security deposit and, the deposit for the utilities and things. That's the next thing I've got to do before the end of July. She said if I do it for the end of July, that she will give me back my $425 that I pay for rent right now to help. But if I don't, if I'm one day over, she's keeping it. And if I'm a week over, I'm going to find my stuff out on the lawn.
Wow.
So I'm trying really hard.
Well, I can understand why. This is life and death. Yeah, both of you. You really need to get out of that house as soon as possible. That goes without saying.
Yes.
How much would you need to be able to make that move over to the house in Fredonia that you're telling us about?
Well, the rent is going to be $800 a month. And that sounds crazy because it's Dublin, but I have found out that the rent is so much higher, like $600 is the norm, and that's for a little tiny house that has almost nothing. It looks like it could just fall down. And I think the reason why she was renting that so cheap is she knew there was a lot of issues with that house. She already knew that it wasn't a healthy and a good one. So I'd have to have the first and last month's rent, which is $1,600. I'd have to have a security deposit, which is another $800, and then I have to have $250, a $50 for the water, $50 for gas, and $50 for electric on utility deposits to get in there. So that's quite a bit of money. So we're trying and going to do our best, because I really feel like that would be the perfect house for us. But all the others, is said, I have potential of falling trying to get into them because of the stairs going in or no railing, and it just wouldn't be safe for me to try.
Yeah, it sounds like it. How much of a boost would you need to definitely be able to make that move?
How much of a boost? Oh, well, we've got close to $700 saved back for one of the month's rent. So I'm going to start trying to see if I can sell some of my furniture to see if I can get some more money, for like the last month's rent and maybe some of the deposit. And I'm going to see if the Ministerial Alliance, maybe they can help with the deposits. I'm not sure. I've never asked for help before. I've always been the person to try to give it. So this is all new to me. It feels really foreign. And, I always think there's people out there that need it more than me. But at this rate, with my health and things, I'm kind of the one needing it this time. But I believe that God will see me through this. He won't let me get put into the yard. I just don't believe that.
He does work miracles, that's for sure. Let me run this by you. The listeners are really caring, benevolent people. I'm going to set up a GoFundMe page for you to help raise the money required so that you can make that move, get out of that nightmare situation you're currently in that's killing both you and your daughter. That's horrible. It's not like it's enough that you had to suffer through all these dogman encounters you had when you were younger. Now you have to worry about the house you're living in killing you as well. So I'm going to set up a GoFundMe page for you to help make up the difference between what you've already saved and what you would need to be able to make that move into a safe house in a much better environment. Like you said, that's closer to the store, it's going to be easier for you in every way, it sounds like. Do you have an idea?
My God, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you have an idea, Joe, as far as a figure I could set on your GoFundMe page, how much you would need?
Oh, gosh. It's probably totally for all of that, and I'm going to have to pay somebody to move us and things because, I don't have anybody. It's probably going to be close to $2,800 to get us all put in there and moved in and safe and everything on and going. That's quite a bit.
Well, that is quite a bit, but you'd be surprised what the listeners can do, especially now they've heard what you've been made to bear and what you're suffering through. So I'm going to create that GoFundMe page, and I think you'll be surprised at what you see if you follow it.
Like I've got 800 of it, with this check from disability. So it would only be like 2,000 for everything else for the last month's rent, the deposit on utilities and things, and then movers. Oh my gosh, that would be such a miracle. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Miracles do happen,
Wow.
Joe. They really do.
Oh my God.
Just so I'm clear, if I set the amount on your GoFundMe page for $2,000, you think that's all you would need to make up the difference?
Well, I feel bad even asking for that amount. Like I said, I've never asked for anything before. So.
Well, yeah, but you need help. And all of us need help. At multiple times through all of our lives, we all need help. So you definitely are in one of those situations right now, Joe. And if the help is there and available, which I definitely do believe it is, I'd be more than happy to get that GoFundMe set up for you. And like I said, I think you'd be surprised at how the listeners will respond.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to everybody that's listening. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is amazing. It's amazing.
You're not alone in this anymore. You've had to deal with those encounters all these years, and basically, you've been alone. But you're not alone anymore. No, you've got help. And please remember that. You've got help.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for caring. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vic.
You're welcome. You are welcome.
Well.
Joe, you've been through a lot recounting those Dogman encounters tonight. I've got tons of questions for you about those encounters. Let me run this by you. Would it be okay if we came back tomorrow night for a special live stream where I could ask you all those questions, and the people in the live chat, that would give them an opportunity to ask questions for you that they've got as well?
I'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Great. Well, if that's the case, everyone, we'll be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central, so that I can ask Joe all these questions. And like I said, if you're in the live chat and you have questions for her, then I'll be more than happy to ask your questions as well. But having said that, we're about out of time, so let's call it at this point and just start fresh tomorrow night then.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Well, that makes it easy. But having said that, thanks again so much for your time, Joe, and have a great night.